Air Marshal Philip Osbourn is a former Chief of Defence Intelligence and Director at Universal Defence and Security Solutions. He's here with me now. Good morning, Air Marshal.
Good morning.
Mr Zelensky and his people, just heard there, want the introduction of a no-fly zone, and that's been resisted. And we understand the formal reasons, but do you think that's going to be true forever?
I guess it depends where the West wants to end up. Excuse me. Militarily, you can put in place a no-fly zone. It's complex. It's dangerous. Has a risk associated with it militarily. But the issue, I think, is less the military reasons and much more the consequences. A while ago, I've been involved in policing no-fly zones. And the critical issue is you have to enforce them. What that means is not just threatening and sometimes shooting down opposition aircraft. It means targeting air defence systems that are trying to stop you operating in the no-fly zone. In this context, it would mean we'd have to be willing to attack Russian, perhaps Belarusian forces, not just in Ukraine, but perhaps in Belarus and perhaps in Russia. So that risk of escalation, significant escalation, and the quite clear path to further conflict is something that the West has got to be comfortable with, has got to be ready for if it implements a no-fly zone.
Do you think that the intelligence assessment that the politicians will be getting now would be saying you could do that, but in truth, rather than creating a situation in which the Russians and Belarusians can back off, it would be, on balance, a provocation for them to step up their firepower?
I think we have to perhaps take a step back here. Putin's in a hole. He's in a corner. He's personalised the conflict in Ukraine. And therefore, that brings with it all kinds of risks. His options are not nearly as clear as they were at the start of this conflict, only 11 days ago. But also at home, he really needs to maintain a narrative, maintain a rationale, which is where he's going at the moment, which is this is counter-NATO. This is to stop NATO expansionism. This is all about the security of Russia. Part of the implementation of a no-fly zone gives him that opportunity to underline that narrative at home, to make this about NATO and Russia, not about his miscalculation in Ukraine. So I think it is the options it gives him to step up into what he wants to be saying that is a real risk that the Western governments will be thinking about and being advised on.
OK, well, let's suppose that doesn't happen. Things proceed pretty much as they are now. Do you think, he's told President Macron in a phone call last week that he wants to control the whole of Ukraine. How realistic is that, given the size of that territory? 4 times the size of England, I think.
I think there's 2 things there. There's the size of the territory, we'll come back to that, but there's 40 million people that don't want him there, and they're showing every day with remarkable resistance, bravery, stoicism, that he just can't hold that country. I think any nation who thinks it's going to hold a country of 40 million plus people who just don't want you there, regardless of the size, is kidding themselves. So he may be saying that taking over Ukraine, removing it as a supposed threat to Russia, is his end state. I just can't see him being advised, even by those yes men that surround him, that that's possible. And therefore, he must be looking for some kind of way out, perhaps partition, which allows him to shift the narrative to say, hey, look, I've achieved what I wanted to achieve. But I think we come back to, he's in a corner. This is not where he planned to be. He planned to have a puppet regime in place on day 2.
I mean, one of the other reasons that perhaps things haven't panned out in the way that he might have expected is that, as many analysts have said, they're rather surprised at what seems to be the poor performance of Russian forces. Has he got a white elephant on his hands? He spent a lot of money bringing those armed forces up to scratch, but they don't seem to be doing what he wants.
At the heart of military power is people. It's, have you got the right people with the right morale, the right training, and the right skills to do the type of things he's trying to do? So yes, you're right, there's a lot of expensive equipment, and a lot of it is stuck in muddy ditches in Ukraine at the moment. If we take a step back again, I think what we're seeing is a hugely overconfident Russian military engaging with the reality of a really high-end, well-equipped, highly motivated opponent. So I think we've seen an era of overconfidence as far as they're concerned, and they have underestimated the Ukrainians. That's led to tactical and operational level failures in terms of logistics, in terms of command and control. But what I think it's also underlined is that Russia's just not used to doing this type of stuff. Big, coordinated air, land, maritime operations on many axes are really difficult. And nations like the UK, the US and others train really hard to ensure you've got that capability. Russia's not been doing that.
Is one consequence of him being, as you put it, in a hole, that he simply just has to get, as it were, a bigger cudgel, i.e., more firepower, shelling of civilian targets, for example?
We're already there. I mean, what we're seeing is the Chechnya, is the Syria playbook. He was trying to be fast. He was trying to be manipulative of public opinion, puppet regime, perhaps in 2 or 3 days. That's clearly not worked. His forces are proving that they're not nearly as agile as they thought they were going to be. And therefore, what we're seeing, tragically, is Russia doing what Russia normally does, which is when it's in a hole, it applies violence, extreme violence, to break civilian morale. I think personally, in the Ukrainians, they picked the wrong opponent.
And when we say extreme violence, how extreme? You know what I'm really asking here. What is he prepared to use?
In terms of in Ukraine, he'll be prepared to use cluster weapons. He's already seen those. He'll be prepared to use thermobaric weapons. We've seen those deployed. To go further than that, again, is to risk a highly significant escalation, which even those deluded individuals around Putin, I think, would be advising him against. This is a multi-level conflict, and actions at the tactical and operational level do have strategic impact. It's a dangerous time, and he'll recognise it's a dangerous time. So I would assess at this stage weapons beyond those conventional weapons of mass destruction that I've just mentioned. I can't see those being used within Ukraine in a tactical context.
Air Marshal Philip Osbourn, thank you so much.
Thank you.